Today's lesson, we are going to continue to work on dividing decimals by decimals and building fluency with that skill. So when we take a look at your first problem on page 344, it says how much protein is in a liter of orange juice? And then what it said to do was to take 9 and 12 hundredths and to divide that by 1.5 liters. So when I take 9 and 12 hundredths to divide by 1.5 liters, my first step that I have to do is I need to move the decimals. So if you remember from our last lesson, we had to first start with our divisor and look at what power of 10 we would have to multiply 1 and 5/10 by to get this value to be a whole number. So I would actually have to multiply 1 and 5/10 times 10 to the first power to get that to equal 15. And so by doing that, I get to move my decimal one place over to the right. But our rule that we talked about is that if I move the decimal one place to right in the divisor, I have to do the same thing to the dividend. So this is going to move one place to the right. And then we're going to follow the rule that we did where we're going to bring that decimal straight up. And then I'm not going to worry about the decimal anymore. So now I'm looking at how many times 912 can be divided by 15. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at how many times 15 can go into 91. So if you need some help with this, just think about that. If I look at 15, 15 is smack dab in the middle. So I'm going to say 15 is going to be approximately 20. 20 is going to go into 90 about 4 times. So if I did 15 times 4 is my starting place, 15 times 4, 4 times 5 is going to be 20. I'm going to put down the 0. I'm going to regroup the 2. 4 times 1 is going to be 4 plus 1 is going to be 2, which is going to be 60. So I'm about 30 away at this point in time. So if I do 30 away, that means I'm going to go to 6. 15 times 6 is going to be 90. So then I'm going to subtract. I have 1 left over. So I'm going to bring down my 2. And then I have to put in a placeholder for how many times 15 can go into 12. Well, 15 can't go into 12. It's too small. So I need to make sure that I put that placeholder there first because I brought a value down. If I didn't bring a value down, I could have added another 0 and went on just fine. But because I brought a value down, I needed to go ahead and put that placeholder for 0. Now I can add another 0 underneath 120. And I have to look at how many times 15 is going to go into 120. So I'm going to come back over here to this 15 times 4. I got 60. So if I double 15 times 4, so if I do 15 times 8, and I just double 60, I'm going to get 120. So 15 is going to go into 128 times. That's 120. I'm going to subtract. I have 0 left over. So my answer is going to be 6.08 grams of protein in 1 liter of orange juice. Okay, so if we take a look at our next problem, we're going to move into your guided practice. So your guided practice for number 1 says that Janie solved 5 and 4/10 divided by 1 and 2/10, and Gary solved 4 and 8/10 divided by 1 and 6/10. And so what they want to know is, why did Janie place a 0 to the right of the dividend, but Gary did not? So if you take a look at the work down on the bottom, it has Janie, her work is her decimal got moved over once, goes right here. She put a 0. Oh, sorry, she put a 0 to the right of the dividend. She didn't put it up here. She put a 0 to the right of the dividend. And then her answer was 4.5. And Gary's answer, when he did this, he brought his decimal over and up, and his answer was 3. So why did she have to put a 0 here and he did not put a 0 here? And so let me write out the problem, and then we'll take a look at why she put a 0 here and he did not. Look at the work that Janie did. She said 12 was able to go into 54 4 times. She got 48 and had 6 left over. She'd already placed the decimal, so at that point she was able to put a value down because she had a remainder of 6. So this right here was a remainder of 6, and she didn't have anything else to bring down, so she added that 0. Whereas Gary, when he got to over here to his problem, 16 went into 48 exactly 3 times, which is 0. So he didn't have a remainder, so he did not need to bring down his 0. So we added a 0 here because there was a remainder of 6, and we needed to work out our decimal answer because remember, we don't just put the 6 up at the top. We have to solve out the problem to see how many times 12 is going to go into 60, which in this case is 5 times, and that's why the answer is 4.5 compared to 3. Okay, so in problems 2 through 5, we're going to go ahead and we're going to find each quotient. We're going to annex, so that's add zeros as needed. So I'm going to have, my first problem is going to be 1 and 8/10, and I'm going to divide that into 72 hundredths. So I look at, first off, how many times I move the decimal. So here I'm going to move the decimal over one place value, so I'm going to multiply it by 10 to the first power. So the decimal is going to move over here, which means my decimal is going to move over 1 here, and then it's going to be brought straight up to right there. And then I look at how many times 18 is going to be able to go into 7, which is 0 times. And then I don't have anything to bring down. And so now I'm going to look at how many times 18 goes into 72. And so I'm just going to start by multiplying. I'm going to do 18 times 3 and see what I get. So 8 times 3 is going to be 24, so I put down the 4. I regrouped the 2. 3 times 1 is going to be 3 plus 2 is going to be 5. I can probably get another 18 in there. So if I add, I'm just going to add 18 instead of doing 18 times 4. 4 and 8 is going to be 2. I regroup the 1. 1, 5, and 1 is going to be 7. So 18 is going to go into 72 4 times. 18 times 4 is 72. I'm going to subtract. I have 0 left over. All right, so let's take a look at our next problem. So the next problem that I have is I have 45 hundredths that I am dividing into 4 and 14 hundredths. So the first thing I do is I look at how many places I'm going to move the decimal. I need to move the decimal 2 places or multiply it by 10 to the second power. So the decimal is going to move 2 places to the right, which means it needs to move 2 places to the right here. And then it gets brought straight up. So now I'm looking at how many times 45 goes into 414. Well, 45 can't go into 4. 45 cannot go into 41. So I have to look about how many times 45 is going to go into 414. So my guess, looking at this, is if I did 45 times 10, that's 450. So I'm going to go down a math fact. So I'm going to do 45 times 9 and see if 45 times 9 is going to work. So 9 times 5 is going to be 45. So I'm going to put down the 5. I'm going to regroup the 4. 9 times 4 is going to be 36 plus 4 is going to be 39. So now I have, so it works. So 9 is going to go above the second 4. And then I have 395, and I'm going to subtract that from 414. So first thing I do is I regroup. 14 subtract 5 is going to be 9. I regroup here, so that became a 0. 3, 10 subtract 9 is going to be 1. So 3 subtract 3 is going to be 0. So I have 190. So what I need to do is I need to go ahead and just add 0. If you want to add it here and bring it down, you can, or you can just add it to the bottom like I did. And then I need to figure out how many times 45 is going to go into 190. So when I look at 45 into 190, right, so I was looking at my problem. I paused the video. I was looking at my problem, and I did a math error. So I'm going to go back over here and check my math error because it's like, 45 goes into 190. It's not going to be an easy one to figure out. So if I check right here, this is where I did my math error. 9 times 4, I think I said was 36, and then I added 4, but I wrote down 39. It's not going to be 39. It's going to be 405. So that's going to change this. So if I do 405, so I'm going to do 400. I'm just going to do it off the side. 414 subtract 405. And when I do that, I'm going to get, let's see, 14 subtract 5 is still going to be 9. 0 subtract 0 is going to be 0. 4 subtract 4 is going to be 0. So I get an answer of 9, which means when I annex that 0, I'm looking at 90. 45 is going to go into 90 2 times, which is going to be 90. I'm going to subtract, and I get 0. So if you're finding that you're having to do a lot of work, I just happened to, as I was looking through the problem and chatting, caught that mistake. So if you get a mistake to where it doesn't seem to be working, go back and check your multiplication to make sure that you don't make a math error like I did there. Hopefully you're checking your work with multiplication to make sure that you've got that problem done correctly. Okay. So the next problem we're going to take a look at is we're going to do 5 6/10, and we're going to divide that by 14 hundredths. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the decimal. Decimal is going to move 2 places to the right here, which means decimal needs to move 2 places to the right. So I need to add a 0, and then I need to move it over and up. So then I'm going to look at how many times 14 can go into 56. And so if I look at 14 as 20 or as 10, I'm going to go to the higher number. So if I did 20 times 2, that would get me to 40. So I think 14 times 2 is going to be too small, because when I do 14 times 2, that's going to be 28. So that's going to be too small. So I'm just going to double it. So I'm going to do 14 times 4. So I'm just going to add 28 here off to the side. So I'm using just different math strategies to find my answer. So 28 plus 8 is going to be 16. I'm going to regroup the 1. 1, 2, and 2 is going to be 5. So I get 56. So 14 is going to go into 56 4 times. And that's going to be 14 times 4 is going to be 56. I'm going to subtract. I have a 0. Now, I'm not done with my problem because I had to add this 0 here. 14, I have to look at how many times 14. I'm going to go ahead and bring it down. I have to look at how many times 14 goes into 0. 14 goes into 0 0 times. So my answer is going to be 40. So if you have to add a 0 before you can bring that decimal up, you have to count it as part of your problem, and you have to put placeholders in as your answer. Okay, so here I had to add a 0 to be able to move my decimal over 2 places. So this now became part of my problem. I had to multiply 14 into 0 to get my answer of 40. All right, the last problem that I'm going to take a look at is I'm going to do 76 hundredths divided by 25 hundredths. So first thing I'm going to do, move my decimal over 2 places, move my decimal over 2 places, and up 1. Okay, I'm going to look at how many times 25 can go into 76. 25 goes into 76 3 times. That's 25. That's 75. I subtract. I'm left with 1. So I add my 0, or if you need to add your 0 there and bring it down, you can. So 25 goes into 10 0 times. So again, I have to put that placeholder there because I wasn't able to have 25 go into 10. And then I can add another 0. 25 goes into 100 4 times. So it's going to be 3.04. 25 times 4 is 100. I subtract and I get 0. Practice the problems that I'd like for you to do are going to be 6 through 14 even. Then you're going to do 17, 20, and 21, making sure that you're showing your steps for your work on all of the problems so I can see it when I take a look at your practices.